I think this is quite easy. I don't think you usually get it quite easily.
This could be a coach killer for whoever loses.
Oh, let's just not go
No
into
one
that.
again.
All right, so the fixture is out. The season is about to start, and today we are counting down the top 10 games you cannot miss in 2025. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. We've got plenty of AFL content coming out this year. I am joined by Darren Parkin. Darren, welcome back to Zero Hanger.
Yeah, nice to be here. It's sneaking up quickly. We've had practice matches already. We've had the Indigenous All-Stars game. So it's very, very close to round zero, if you will, in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And we are joined by Mitch Keating, Chief AFL Editor. Also, the author of this list. No, you just put the games in order.
Oh, this is a big project, which we'll touch on in a second. But 10 games that fans are going to be certainly excited for, neutral or otherwise.
Yeah, brought to us by the season guide, the Zero Hanger AFL season guide for 2025.
Yeah, massive. It's our 4th edition, 140 plus pages, profiles on about 700 plus players as club previews. There's hate. Just roll the cutaway thing.
Before we get into it, make sure you're set for the new season with Zero Hanger's 2025 AFL Season Guide. The comprehensive season guide features over 140 pages of dedicated, detailed footy content ahead of the 2025 season. With profiles of every single player, team previews, fixtures, recruitment reports, and much, much more. Best of all, it's free. Get it now from zerohanger.com.
All right, with that out of the way, let's go 10-1, with number 1 being the game that we are most excited about in 2025. We're going to start with number 10. It is Essendon versus Richmond, around 11. Darren, dream time at the G.
Yeah, the Bombers have been the last 2 years roughly top 4 at about this stage of the season. The Tigers last year ran them close. I think lost by 10 points. Always a big crowd. You've got a young group obviously trying to impress against an Essendon side that has generally been setting markers down in that first half of the season, and that's when obviously the questions have been asked about their ability to sustain that. But you can kind of picture it in your head that the Bombers will be up and about, the Tigers will be full of energy to get into that, and then you've obviously got the spectacle that is the pre-game ceremonies, the crowd, the atmosphere. So always one to have a look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like if the quality of the game that we get, like we said, the spectacle is probably what gets it in this list, but you'd hope a young Tigers squad kind of steps up to that occasion, and then whether the AFL are happy with that, if it is a bit one-sided, which some might expect with the Richmond outfit coming up against Essendon, who usually primed in the middle part of the season, and whether they potentially look at tweaking it going forward, but I wouldn't think that would be the case. Like we saw what Carlton had to deal with round 1, coming up against a pretty good Richmond outfit for some time, and I think the Tigers should rightfully hold that spot against Essendon for the next few years anyway.
I'm not that excited about this. I like the Dreamtime thing, but Essendon are only exciting at the start of the year. I reckon this is around about where they start falling off.
Which makes it a danger game.
We'll
then.
circle back to this after. And I think you might be right.
I don't think it makes top 10. There's a game missing from this list that I think should be in there, but all right. Anyway, all right. Happy with that, number 10? Done?
Sure.
Cool. Okay. All right. Number 9, Geelong versus Hawthorn. Classic rivalry, round of 6 at the MCG. What do you reckon?
Yeah, Easter Monday.
Yeah.
It's usually in these top 10 lists, isn't it? And I think even the last few years when the Hawks might not have been as competitive, the games themselves between these two are always so strong. I remember 10 years ago, you'd have Cats v Hawks in the first quarter, felt like there was 5 minutes left in the last, and game was on the line. So, so much tradition between these two, more contemporary than anything, but even go back to the 89 grand final and even a little bit further, but should be good. Hawks flying, Cats wanting to prove that they're still up there and thereabouts, so it's bank on it to be a pretty good game.
I mean, these are 2 potential top 4 sides for me.
Yeah, well, top 4 side from last year in Geelong versus one that was top 4 from about round 6 onwards, and is shaping to be top 4 again. And it's one of those years where Easter is a little bit later, so you've got Easter Monday, and then you got Anzac Day in the same week, so it makes it a cracking week of footy overall. So yeah, I mean the Hawks, the expectations are that they'll hit the ground running, and you just can't discount Geelong. And then you throw in all of the history that comes with this game. It's mouthwatering prospect, and they could play in the final against each other.
We get Anzac and Easter Monday in the same day. We're gonna have no people on at Zero Hanger headquarters during that week
off.
All right, cool. Well, that leads into number 8 pretty easily. So number 8, Collingwood versus Essendon, Anzac Day clash, round 7.
Yeah, you might have some MCC members that just stay at the MCG potentially for the entirety of the week. But Yeah, I mean, you've only got to go. It's the 30th anniversary of when they first played on Anzac Day in 1995, which was a draw and arguably the best home and away game of the modern era of that one. And they played in a draw last year as well. So always tight, particularly the first meeting in the year between Collingwood and Essendon is usually a cracker. You could see upwards of 90, 95,000 people, and the amount of times it's decided by a single figure margin should be a belter.
Yeah, the crowd alone, pre-game, would put that in this list no matter where the two clubs are at. Given Collingwood probably pushing up again, Essendon want to be pushing for a top 8 spot. I think we should get a similar contest to what we saw last year.
Yep. All right, number 7, Collingwood versus Hawthorn, round 12. Yeah, all right. Tell me about this one.
We had to wait a little bit last year to get Ginnivan at the G, but the gather round game to finish off that weekend in South Australia was still a pretty good spectacle, despite it being, interstate. And then,
was this the first time he's played?
No, they did play late last year, and he had a bit of fun.
By
I think.
plenty,
and they've had the rub over them a little bit. Went at the G the last couple of times they've played the Hawks, despite Collingwood being quite at the top, and the Hawks were struggling a little bit a couple of years ago. But same thing. You expect a lot of attention on Ginnivan and a few others, and it's always been a bit of a fiery contest between these two. And if they're both up and about at this point of the season, another very heavy crowd, you would think, 90 plus K.
Yep.
Yeah, as Mitch points out, Hawthorn beat Collingwood late in 2023, which kind of planted the seeds for what they might go on to do. Collingwood recovered from that and won the flag. And then last year, the gather-round game where Hawthorn had a shot on the run with about 30 seconds to go that just missed, that would have won them the game, and then belted them the second time. So they'd feel pretty good about their chances, Hawthorn. But yeah, I agree with what Mitch was saying, that Collingwood are expected to push back this year. And I think by that stage of the year, they'll both be going quite well.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. All right. Coming into number 6, GWS versus Sydney, round 8, Battle of the Bridge.
Yeah. Well, you go back to September and how that ended for GWS. That one of the best finals in recent memory. I guess before the week that followed. But heartbreaking loss for them against their state rivals. And the Isaac Heaney heroics and everything that came to it in that game, and what the Giants are looking to do to bounce back this year and put all that behind them. I reckon you can put this down to being a pretty fiery contest from the first bounce. Yep.
If there's finals heartbreak and then grand final heartbreak, so the Giants, those two really bitter pills to swallow in the finals, and then Sydney, how do they recover from the grand final? How much does the coaching transition counter that, perhaps? Does it give them a bit of a freshen up coming into the season when they might have been feeling the pinch from what happened on grand final day? So, I think most people would say that the Giants can win the flag, and would be in a lot of people's conversations. And maybe I reckon more people would be convinced of that than they are of Sydney. But certainly Sydney always around the mark, similar to what we said about the Cats.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be curious about how Sydney bounced back. And by this point, round 8, we should have a good idea of how they're going to go in the year.
Yeah, I think that point last year, they had just gotten on top. I think a couple of other sides that were undefeated might have fallen off a game or two, and then they really put their neck out. So if it's the same this year, you expect GWS to be right up there with them.
And Sydney owned the Giants in home and away games last year. They did them pretty easily, but then obviously the final was a very different scenario where it showed the Giants had hit their straps again by that stage. So, keen to see how that looks this time around.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so coming into number 5, coming into the top 5. So the first showdown, round 9, Port Adelaide versus Adelaide Oval, obviously.
Can't not have the showdown on this list. No matter how good the game usually ends up, and we have had some crackers the last couple of years though. So much just from Monday heading into the week, always a lot of tension. And then you had the Josh Rochelle stuff last year. Yeah, when you go back to the Jordan Dawson goal a couple of years ago, there's moments whether they're on the field or not, and it's probably the number one rivalry in the comp. You'd think. Some might say Carlton Collingwood, but just the state rivalry between these two, I think it's almost unmatched.
Yeah, I 100% agree. We've had a lot of players getting reported and heavy suspensions as well. Not that you necessarily go to the footy for that, but
the Houston Rankin incident.
Yeah, that's
if
right.
Houston was playing for them this year, it might be even spicier. Yeah,
and I think there'd be a decent record of the outsider winning these matches, whichever it is, whether it's Port or the Crows. It just tends to throw up those. It is probably the classic example of doesn't matter where they are on the ladder as a matchup. Like, I mean, if you look at West Coast Fremantle, for example, the better side, I would think more often than not has won that matchup.
Yeah.
Whereas Port Adelaide, it just feels like it's a flip a coin.
I reckon, okay, I've got a theory. We're in round 9 at this point. So Port Adelaide versus Adelaide. I reckon this could be, if either of those teams are going badly, if they're both going badly, this could be a coach killer for whoever loses that.
Well, the Hinkley stuff, which I think we'll touch on a little bit more as well into this video, is fascinating. Like, hard to see them abort that plan.
Unless it went really badly.
But well, that too.
That's the only way.
And then Matthew Nix is going to be a fascinating one.
Yeah.
He's at least under contract, but no finals in his tenure. And they've tried to build their way up, and they should have been in there a couple of years ago if it wasn't for Postgate. But I think I couldn't rule out what you might be predicting there.
I think there's going to be more pressure on that game than there would normally be for a regular showdown, essentially.
And I think the Hinkley question is, if they're not going well, do people ask the question, have you created a wasted year where it's you're almost in a holding pattern? And do you accelerate it and say, we'll do it now? Or do you sit there and think, well, you've made the decision and that's a distraction? So I think they've done the right thing to try to block out all the noise, but it can create a different form of noise.
It's an interesting one.
Okay.
Although it would be so good if they did win it and Hinkley just goes out on top.
Yeah, okay. Let's we'll probably talk about that again later on down the list. But let's move to number 4 now. So round 1, Sydney versus Brisbane at the SCG.
How could you not have a grand final rematch? Yeah. It wasn't the grand final everyone wanted last year, but you'd think they kind of come back. Sydney will have a fair bit to say. The Lions will want to, in their premiership defense, beat and knock off one of the best teams. You say it's at the SCG as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, away from home. And they had during the home and away season last year, a ripper game as well. So there's a lot going to be in this one just on top of what they had in September last year.
Yeah, there's another, obviously, Brisbane fixture that we'll touch on a bit later on, but interesting start for them to the year. I mean, this is round 1, and they will have already played and will have already unfurled their flag prior to this game. But, it's a big contest, and clearly Sydney would have been stewing over it all through the off-season. So, and the fact that it's at the SCG, sometimes the smaller ground doesn't suit Brisbane quite as much. So, I think they're certainly not going anywhere, the Lions. So, I expect they'll put up a pretty good show.
Yeah. Are you expecting Sydney to be as good as they were this year?
They've got a young list. Like, I feel like people think they're, like, while they are at the top and competing, there's not like this fall away that other clubs might have, like a Geelong and Collingwood had a little bit of. Like their midfield is so young. Like, what if Heaney's the oldest there? Then you've got your Rowbottoms, Gouldens, Warner's all below him. So no, they've got a primed list. If it's not there yet, it could get a lot better.
And I think that the coaching change does actually help. I mean, part of the residual pain I would think would have been for Longmire, having had that happen to him a lot. He's the one trying to pick them up from it all. I mean, for Dean Cox, it's a bit of a freshen up. So I think that helps them get through that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So number 3, we have Collingwood versus Port Adelaide at the MCG. This is going to be an interesting one. So return of Dan Houston.
Yeah, that's what I think the main headline for this one is. He'll miss their opening round trip to GWS due to that suspension. He copped in the showdown that we mentioned earlier. So first game in front of home fans. I think the Pies as well, their first home game, they'll pack that one in. And it's going to be an interesting, I think, outcome because you've got Ken Hinkley's first game in his last season, and they'll be wanting to get off to a strong start. But the Pies come back from Sydney the week before, and I think most will tip GWS to win that one. And then if Port Adelaide get a good start on the Pies as well, if they start 0-2, it's going to start making for a pretty interesting story. They had a slow start last year, and obviously they still fell short. But yeah, I think it's on top of the Houston stuff and on top of the Hinkley stuff. It's going to be quite interesting if the Pies are coming in 0-1 and the Power are coming in for their first game a little bit fresher.
And I guess for Port, last year they got belted by Collingwood in the corresponding fixture, maybe about round 2 or something of last season. And I guess the knock on them has been, a very good home and away side, but when they play the top echelon sides, they've just fallen short. Certainly through the finals, that was the case. And Collingwood at the MCG is the closest you would get to a hostile finals-like atmosphere. So can they stand up to that? Claim an early scalp like Collingwood early in the season would give them a lot of confidence.
Yep. All right, so I agree with that. So number 2, this is an interesting one. So Brisbane versus Geelong, opening round at the Gabba.
Yeah, Geelong beat them at the Gabba in the wet last year.
Oh, yeah. They just played the conditions a lot better.
Owned the game completely. And then obviously Brisbane with that famous preliminary final win late in the year, which set them on the path to winning the flag the week after. So Brisbane will unfurl the flag. It's a tough start for them. They got Geelong and then Sydney, so their prelim and their grand final opponent in the first 2 weeks. The Gabba factor, that they lost the opening round match to Carlton last year, so they'll probably be on guard. So big night for Brisbane with the unfurling of the flag, and Geelong always keep you honest.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of little tales in this one. Like you said, their first game in their premiership defense, they get the flag, home crowd, sell out. Come up against the Cats, who will have Bailey Smith playing for his first game. You mentioned the preliminary final, which was arguably game of the year. Some might think last year as well. And then you could see Levi Ashcroft in his debut. You get Will Ashcroft, off his Norm Smith medal winning performance and seeing what he can do in a third season. There's going to be heaps
if
in
he's
this
in
one.
the team. We didn't put him in the best 23.
So there's going to be plenty here in this game. So we'll see how this one unfolds for Brisbane's first game for 2025.
Have you got a tip? You're a Geelong guy.
Oh yeah, but I Brisbane I think we should be able to handle it. We're a couple of weeks out, so it's not like it's ages away to predict. But I think that both sides should be pretty healthy. It might take a little bit for Geelong to click with that midfield mix. But at the same time, Joe Danaher and his absence and what that looks like is another one as well that we didn't mention. So I'd say Brisbane by maybe a couple, 2 to 4 goals, call it 3 goals.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Geelong will be right in it. Of all of the Victorian sides, their interstate record's pretty sound. So particularly early in season. So I think they'll take it up to them. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'll probably take Brisbane in that one as well. All right, so we've come to number 1. This is a pretty interesting one. This is going to be all on you, Mitch. You made this order.
You said there was one that you wanted that didn't get in.
Oh, we can talk about that after.
Before we get to number one.
So King's birthday.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of feeling in between the D's and Pies. The game itself wasn't that good last year.
Petrarca stuff was...
But I think Petrarca coming back up against Collingwood is going to be
interesting. Yeah, and obviously there's always the Maynard stuff as well. I don't mind it. I reckon we could easily have that at 10.
Yeah.
Carlton are an interesting side absent as well. And I guess the thing for them is that in terms of the blockbuster fixtures, their marquee game is usually Richmond, which has lost a bit of its...
Yeah.
And obviously the Essendon Richmond game's got the Dreamtime factor, whereas Carlton Richmond, it's just a round 1 game, and now it's not even the opening round anymore. So
I don't think that game's been exciting for like 5 years.
No, not really. But I don't think it really ever has been, because Richmond dominated it, and then Carlton dominated it.
Yeah, it's flipped a little bit.
I think it's just because it's at the start of the season and everyone's up and about for it.
What was it? Was it COVID when they were playing in front of no one, or was that Collingwood Richmond?
There was one, I reckon. I reckon the very first, that COVID round where we played round 1 and then didn't play for 4 months. I reckon that was in front of no one.
Yeah, and then maybe it was the Collingwood Richmond game was the first game back after lockdown, and let's just not go
no
into
one
that.
again. The dark days.
Let's just get into number 1.
Was there any that you think should be in there? St Kilda North.
St Kilda North, yeah. Who did North play on Good Friday this year? Is that Carlton again? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, cool. Right, number 1.
Number 1.
You've put this one number 1. I agree. I reckon this should be number 1.
I think this is quite easily.
Yeah.
I don't think you usually get it quite easily in these kind of lists. It's usually, the same old ones will be pushing.
Mm-hmm. And I like that it's not actually a marquee game. Well, it kind of is, but
it's not like this time last year we wouldn't have this.
No, not at all.
So this is Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn at Gather Round at Adelaide Oval. Let's just call it the Ken Hinkley versus Ginnivan game.
It's going to be so... And we're going to be there, by the way.
We'll be there.
Stuff that we'll have in the next few weeks to get some fans excited. But a best way to wrap up Gather Round in front of a pretty hostile...
Your last game of the round.
Yeah, last game, Sunday twilight. And that went off, like the Hawthorn Collingwood game that they had last year that we mentioned earlier. That was such a good atmosphere.
Yeah.
Even though it was at the end of a 9-game run for a lot of fans who attended, and a neutral game. No local links, but this time you've got Port Adelaide hosting the Hawks. You've got the Hinkley, Ginnivan, Sicily, Sam Mitchell stuff, and it's just going to be so hostile, so good. I think some people are upset that it was in Gather Round. Like, you could have had it separate, and it still would have been a big spectacle. But I think you're going to have a lot more Hawks fans there, which is going to be a big part of it. I can't wait. And the fact that we'll get to be there, I'm pretty happy.
Exactly. Yeah.
We all look at the final last year, which was a classic, but the meeting earlier in the year at the same ground where Port won with a miracle goal with 10 seconds to go. So they played 2 classics last year, both at the same venue, both by less than a kick. Hawthorn have just gone on in leaps and bounds from that earlier meeting, and obviously the Port Adelaide, desperate to break through and make a grand final. So they're 2 fascinating sides, and all of the little subplots in the contest for sure.
Yeah, I think the most fascinating part for me is that on the night, like the last time they played, on the night, Ginnivan wasn't actually the one that instigated anything. It was
his midweek actions on the gram, and then
stuff, and
so he was actually quite professional on the night.
on the
so
night.
that's why I don't know if he's going to actually do too much. I say that now. I'll probably eat my words.
Ken Hinkley's got nothing to lose anymore. He could come out and say anything.
That's the other thing. He could.
What are they going to do? Fire him?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess they could, but it just What do you think? A tip for this one? Go real early.
I'm gonna say Hawthorn by 6 goals.
I think the Hawks get this done just because of their back line. I don't think Port's tall forwards if they don't have Marshall.
I could see it being a 9 or 10 goal each arm wrestle. And I get the feeling Hawthorn are going to win a fair chunk of those. They lost both of them last year, so I reckon they're due to get them.
Yeah, all right. Well, I think that is a rightful number 1, Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn at Gather Round. Let us know in the comments what you think of our top 10 list. Actually, of Mitch's top 10 list. I didn't.
Bring it.
I'm not claiming this one. Any last comments, fellas?
Download the season guide.
Yeah, season guide. That's about it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com. Thanks for watching.